The headphones were her shield. Amara Osi was 9 years old, and she had learned to put them on the moment the voices started rising, not even needing music playing, because the headphones themselves were armor against the sounds coming through the walls of their small apartment on Birchwood Lane, where her father Kwame came home, exhausted from double shifts with a bad back and short temper, and her mother Adana juggled two jobs and somehow kept food on the table. Two people who loved each other, but had forgotten how to show it without fighting about money and time and all the small things that piled into big things, until Amara perfected the art of pretending she couldn't hear. What happened after a biker named Nathaniel Boateng saw her at a family support night, wearing those headphones like protection, and recognized the look because he had worn it too, 40 years ago. After weekly sessions became communication, tools, became treated back pain, became better jobs, became a father. Learning to be soft became a family. Learning to be gentle became headphones given away because they weren't needed anymore. Proved that families can heal when someone shows them how that children shouldn't have to protect themselves from their own homes, and that the loudest piece is the one that finally lets you take the armor off. The headphones were her shield. Amara Osei was 9 years old, and she had learned to put them on the moment the voices started rising. She didn't even need music playing, though sometimes she turned it up loud enough to feel the bass in her bones. The headphones were armor, a barrier between her ears and the sounds that came through the walls of their small apartment on Birchwood Lane. Her parents weren't bad people. She knew that, even at 9. Her father, Kwame, worked double shifts at the warehouse, came home exhausted with a bad back and a short temper. Her mother, Adana, juggled two part-time jobs and still somehow kept the house clean and food on the table. They loved each other. Amara was certain of that. But love didn't stop the fighting. It was always about money, or time, or the dishes that didn't get done, or the bills that came in red envelopes, or the car that needed repairs they couldn't afford. Small things that piled up until they became big things. And then voices rose and doors slammed, and Amara put on her headphones and pretended she couldn't hear. She had gotten very good at pretending. At school, when teachers asked if everything was okay at home, she smiled and said yes. When her grandmother called on Sundays and asked how her parents were doing, she said fine. When her little brother Kofi, only 5, asked why Mommy and Daddy were so loud, she told him they were just talking about grown-up stuff. She had been lying for so long she almost believed it herself. Nathaniel Boateng was 48 years old, a family therapist who had been riding with the Ebony Brotherhood MC for 17 years. He had spent 2 decades helping families in crisis, sitting in rooms where anger and hurt filled every corner, guiding people toward understanding when they had forgotten how to speak without wounding. He had seen marriages shatter and marriages heal. He had watched children carry burdens no child should carry, and he had helped some of them set those burdens down. The club was where he found his own peace. 17 years of brotherhood, of long rides through open country, of men who understood that strength wasn't about fists, but about showing up again and again for the people who needed you. The Ebony Brotherhood did community work throughout Clarksville. Food drives, school supply giveaways, mentorship programs for young men who needed guidance, and once a month, they partnered with the Birchwood Community Center to host family support nights, offering free resources to families struggling with everything from job loss to communication breakdown. It was at one of these events that Nathaniel first noticed Amara. She was sitting in the corner of the community center's main room, headphones on, watching her parents fill out intake paperwork with expressions that hovered somewhere between hope and shame. Her little brother was playing with blocks on the floor, oblivious. But Amara was watching everything. cataloging every glance her parents exchanged, every tension in their shoulders. Nathaniel recognized that look. He had worn it himself 40 years ago, in a house where the fighting never seemed to stop. Hit subscribe if you believe that families can heal when someone shows them how. Comment the name of your city, and share this with someone who needs to know that conflict doesn't have to be the end of the story. The intake form said Kwame and Adana Osi were seeking help with communication issues. Nathaniel read between the lines. Financial stress, probably. Work exhaustion. The slow erosion of connection that happened when life got hard, and people forgot how to be gentle with each other. Not abuse, not violence. Just two people who had lost their way and were drowning in the gap between them. He introduced himself to the parents first, shaking hands, explaining his background as both a therapist and a member of the Ebony Brotherhood. Kwame's eyes lingered on the leather vest, the patches, the look of a man who had seen hard things and come out the other side. "You're a therapist and a biker?" Kwame asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. 20 years counseling families, 17 years riding with brothers who'd do anything for each other. Nathaniel smiled. The two aren't as different as you'd think. Both require patience, trust, and knowing when to listen instead of talk. Adana relaxed slightly at that. She had the exhausted look of a woman carrying too much for too long. "We're not sure this will help," she admitted. "We've tried talking. It always ends the same way." "That's because talking isn't the same as communicating," Nathaniel said gently. "And communication isn't something most of us are taught. We learn it from our parents, who learned it from theirs, and sometimes what gets passed down isn't healthy." He glanced at Amara in the corner, headphones on, pretending not to listen. "May I speak with your daughter for a moment?" The parents exchanged a look, uncertain but willing. Adana nodded. Nathaniel crossed the room slowly, giving Amara time to see him coming. He pulled up a chair a few feet away from her, not too close, not invading her space. She didn't take off her headphones, but she was watching him. "I'm Nathaniel," he said, loud enough for her to hear through the padding. "I'm a friend. Can we talk for a minute?" Amara hesitated. Then, slowly, she slid the headphones down around her neck. "I know what those are for," Nathaniel said, nodding at the headphones. "They're not just for music, are they?" Amara's eyes widened slightly. She didn't answer. "You use them when things get loud at home, when your parents are fighting and you don't want to hear it. Am I right?" A long pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "Can I tell you something, Amara?" She nodded again. "I used to do the same thing. When I was your age, my parents fought all the time. I'd hide in my room with a pillow over my ears, pretending I couldn't hear. I thought if I couldn't hear it, it wasn't happening." Amara's eyes glistened. She didn't speak. "But here's what I learned," Nathaniel continued. "The fighting wasn't about me. It was never about me. My parents were struggling with things I couldn't understand, grown-up problems that felt too big for them to handle. And they didn't know how to talk to each other without hurting each other." He leaned forward slightly. "Your parents love you. I can see it in the way they look at you. They came here tonight because they want to do better. They just need someone to show them how." Amara's voice was barely a whisper. "Can you show them? That's exactly what I'm going to try to do. If you're enjoying this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps this video reach more people who need to see it. Now back to the story. The first family session was held 3 days later at Nathaniel's office. The space was designed to feel safe, with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle, soft lighting, and a small table with tissues that families inevitably needed. Nathaniel had learned long ago that the physical environment mattered. People couldn't open up in rooms that felt cold or clinical. Kwame and Adana arrived together, but sat with space between them. the careful distance of people who had learned that closeness led to conflict. Amara sat next to her mother, headphones around her neck like a security blanket. Kofi stayed home with his grandmother, too young for this conversation. Nathaniel began by establishing ground rules. No interrupting, no blame language. Speak from your own experience using I feel, rather than you always. Simple tools that most people had never been taught. Then he asked them to tell their story. Kwame went first. He talked about the warehouse job, the 12-hour shifts, the back pain that never fully went away. He talked about coming home too tired to think, about feeling like a failure because he couldn't provide the life he had promised Adana when they married. Adana cried as she listened. When it was her turn, she talked about her own exhaustion, the 2 jobs that barely covered the bills, the loneliness of feeling like she and Kwame were roommates instead of partners. She talked about the arguments that started over nothing and escalated until she couldn't remember what they were fighting about. And then Nathaniel asked Amara to speak. The room went still. Amara looked at her parents, at their tear-streaked faces, at the vulnerability they were showing for the first time in front of her. She pulled the headphones off her neck and set them on the table. I put these on because I don't want to hear you yell at each other, she said, her voice small but steady. I pretend I can't hear, but I always hear. And it makes me feel like it's my fault. Like if I was better, you wouldn't fight so much. Adana made a sound like something breaking inside her. Baby, no, she whispered. It's never your fault. Never. Kwame was crying now, too. This big, strong man who worked double shifts to support his family, undone by his daughter's words. Amara, he said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you could hear. I didn't know you thought. He couldn't finish. Nathaniel let the silence hold for a moment. Then he said, this is where the healing starts. Right here, in this honesty. You can't fix what you won't acknowledge. And you've just acknowledged something important. He looked at each of them in turn. The fighting isn't about any of you being bad people. It's about stress and exhaustion and patterns you learned long before you had a choice. But you have a choice now. You can learn new patterns. You can build a home where the fighting doesn't have to happen. Can you help us? Adana asked. That's why I'm here. If Bike Diaries has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. And hit that hype button if you haven't already. Now back to the story. The work was slow and sometimes painful, but it was work that mattered. Nathaniel met with the Osei family weekly for 3 months. He taught them communication techniques that replaced accusation with understanding. He helped them identify the triggers that turned minor disagreements into major battles. He gave them homework, daily check-ins where they asked each other how they were really doing, not just going through the motions. He also addressed the underlying issues. Kwame's back pain was referred to a specialist who discovered a treatable condition. With proper care and medication, the constant discomfort that had shortened his temper began to fade. He was still tired from long shifts, but he wasn't in agony anymore. Adana was connected with a job training program that led to a better position with benefits. 1 job instead of 2, regular hours, health insurance for the family. The financial pressure that had been crushing them began to ease. And for Amara, Nathaniel provided something she hadn't known she needed, a safe adult to talk to. They met once a week, just the 2 of them, for what Nathaniel called check-ins. They talked about school, about her friends, about the books she was reading. They also talked about her feelings, the anxiety that still spiked when her parents disagreed, the hypervigilance that had become so normal she didn't recognize it as abnormal. You're allowed to be a kid, Nathaniel told her during one session. You're not responsible for your parents' emotions. You're not responsible for keeping the peace. Your only job is to grow up and figure out who you want to be. Amara thought about that for a long time. I want to be someone who helps families, she said finally. Like you. Nathaniel smiled. Then you will be, and you'll be amazing at it. The Ebony Brotherhood became part of the Osei family's extended support system. It happened naturally, the way meaningful connections often do. Kwame mentioned that his car needed repairs he couldn't afford, and 3 brothers showed up with tools and parts and spent a Saturday making it roadworthy again. Adana mentioned that Kofi was struggling in school, and a retired teacher in the club offered free tutoring twice a week. And for Amara, the club provided something unexpected: models of healthy masculinity. She had grown up seeing her father as a man who yelled when things went wrong, who retreated into silence when he was hurt, who showed love through provision, but not through words. But the men of the Ebony Brotherhood showed her something different. She saw them resolve disagreements with calm conversations. She saw them express affection openly, hugging each other, telling each other they mattered. She saw them cry at funerals and laugh at cookouts and treat women with respect and children with patience. This is what men can be, Nathaniel told her once, when she commented on how different the club brothers seemed from the men she knew. This is what your father can be too, when he learns it's safe to be soft. 6 months after that first night at the community center, the Osei household had transformed. The fighting hadn't disappeared entirely. Kwame and Adana still disagreed, still had moments of frustration and tension, but the screaming was gone. The slammed doors were gone. The cold silences that lasted days were gone. In their place was something new: negotiation, compromise, the ability to say I'm hurt without it becoming a war. Amara noticed the change in small ways at first. Her parents started saying good morning to each other with actual eye contact. They started asking how each other's day was and waiting for the real answer. They started touching again. Small gestures of affection that Amara had almost forgotten were possible. And then she noticed something bigger. She stopped reaching for her headphones. The reflex was still there, the muscle memory of years of self-protection. But one evening, when her parents started disagreeing about something in the kitchen, Amara caught herself reaching for the headphones and then stopping. Because the disagreement didn't escalate. Kwame took a breath and said, "I'm frustrated, not you're wrong." Adana listened and responded instead of defended. They worked through it in 5 minutes and ended up laughing about something else entirely. Amara sat at the kitchen table, headphones untouched, and watched her parents be partners instead of opponents. This is what home was supposed to feel like. On the 1-year anniversary of that first community center meeting, the Osei family hosted a dinner. Nathaniel was the guest of honor, along with several brothers from the Ebony Brotherhood who had helped along the way. The apartment on Birchwood Lane was small but spotless, filled with the smell of Adana's cooking and the sound of Kofi's laughter as he showed off the reading he had learned with his tutor. Amara helped set the table, moving with an ease she hadn't possessed a year ago. The tension that had lived in her shoulders was gone. The watchfulness in her eyes had softened into something closer to peace. After dinner, Kwame stood to speak. He was not a man of many words, had never been comfortable with public emotion, but he had learned in the past year that vulnerability was not weakness. "I want to thank Nathaniel," he said, his voice rough but steady. "A year ago, I was failing my family. Not because I didn't love them, but because I didn't know how to show it without hurting them. I thought providing was enough. I thought being tired excused being harsh. I was wrong." He looked at Adana, who was crying quietly. "My wife deserved a partner, not a roommate. My children deserved a father who could be gentle. And Nathaniel showed me that I could be that man, that it wasn't too late to learn. He turned to Amara. "And my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "My daughter shouldn't have needed headphones to feel safe in her own home. That's on me. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure she never needs them again." Amara crossed the room and hugged her father, this man who had learned to be soft, this man who had done the hard work of changing. "I'm proud of you, Daddy," she whispered. Kwame held her tight and cried without shame. "Thank you for watching this story about a 9-year-old girl who wore headphones to block out her parents fighting, and the biker who helped her family find peace." It was inspired by the millions of families struggling with conflict and stress. Families that aren't broken beyond repair, but simply need someone to show them a better way. If your family is struggling, please reach out. The National Parent Helpline at 1-855-427-2736 offers support and resources. Family counseling services can teach communication skills that transform relationships. Most conflict comes from stress and unlearned patterns, not from lack of love. Subscribe to Bike Diaries. Hit that hype button to boost this video. And if you want to support what we do, the membership link is below. Share this with everyone who needs to remember that families can heal, that children shouldn't have to protect themselves from their own homes, and that sometimes the hardest thing a parent can do is admit they need help. Amara Osei is 13 now. She no longer owns those headphones. She gave them away to a younger girl at the community center, explaining that she didn't need them anymore. She volunteers at family support nights twice a month, helping children who remind her of herself. Nathaniel Boateng is 52. He still rides with the Ebony Brotherhood, still counsels families, still looks for the children in corners, with headphones and faraway eyes. The Osei family joins the club for cookouts and charity events, part of an extended family that formed around one night of courage. Kwame and Adana just celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary. They renewed their vows in a small ceremony, with Amara and Kofi as witnesses, promising not just to love each other, but to be gentle with each other, to communicate when it's hard, to never stop doing the work. The headphones sit in a drawer now, unused. The house is finally quiet enough without them. And that's the loudest kind of peace.